Okay, so just a little bit about me. My name's Elise Guthrie Stirling. I am a second year full-time PhD applied autism student at the University of Strathclyde, and my principal supervisor is Anna Robinson, who is absolutely fantastic and heavily involved in the autism scene in Scotland. And prior to doing my PhD, I was a teacher for 15 years. I specialised in autism and additional support needs, and for the latter part of my career, I was working in autism specialist bases attached to mainstream. I've been a postgraduate student for basically the same length of time as I've been a teacher, engaged in my special interest of pupil support and inclusive education, with a particular specialism in autism across the span of 3 master's degrees. Allison, I can still hear you.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So across the span of 3 master's degrees until last year, I finally decided to do my PhD. My research at Strathclyde is about understanding authentic autistic play, and also the potential of a professional learning programme for teachers about that. This wasn't actually my original research topic, but when I started to go into the literature, I got so caught up in my fascination with autism and play that I decided to just completely change it. I felt like it was an area that definitely needed explored, and I really wanted to do it justice. So I am autistic myself. I was diagnosed 7 years ago, following my ADHD diagnosis over a decade before that. I have 3 kids, all of whom are autistic, 2 of them with a diagnosis, 1 awaiting diagnosis, and basically they inspire everything I do. So my research, my work, and all my future goals, I am inspired by them. I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect today. So I plan to talk about authentic autistic play, leading you a little bit through the literature that I found useful and illuminating, and a little bit about my own experiences as well. A pre-warning that I will be talking to the slides because I am very literal, so I've not yet managed to master the skill of presenting and thinking at the same time, so I can't have 2 different screens with 2 different things on them. I am talking to exactly what's on my screen right now, so I do apologise. And I am a very visual person. I have lots of photos and bright colours on my slides. So if this isn't very accessible for you, I do have a text version of the slides available to send on to people afterwards. At the end, I'm going to provide suggestions for working with autistic children, but I imagine for many individuals connected with PARC, this will feel like second nature. So I don't want MD to feel like I'm, kind of teaching grandma to suck eggs, because I know that a lot of people will be very familiar with this. I'm looking forward to taking questions at the end, but I will also provide contact details. So if MD thinks of anything, I'm happy to be contacted later on. The topics to be covered today. We'll start with some embedded ideas of autistic play, and that's just a general overview of the dominant discourse. Challenging the embedded ideas of autistic play, so asking what if autistic play is just different? Autistic children's play preferences, and that's just about what the literature says about these preferences. Some alternative ideas of autistic play, and that's really some interesting, or I find it interesting, historical insights into autistic play. My research, just a brief overview. My experiences, another brief overview. And those suggestions for embracing autistic play. But before we get started on that, I wanted to have a look at what my title means. I wanted to make this crystal clear, and I found this beautiful definition that sums up exactly what I mean by my title. So hidden gems are something possessing a value or beauty that is not immediately apparent, which therefore has received far less recognition than it deserves. And I think that could be said of any autistic occupation, and we'll come back to that at the end and we'll have a think about what that's actually meant. So if you could possibly just consider this interpretation as we go, and we'll have a wee look at it at the end again. So for embedded ideas of autistic play, I think we're all probably quite aware of this, but traditionally play in autism is seen as being delayed, deficient, impaired and underdeveloped. The dominant discourse has been that autistic children have pervasive challenges in the development of their play, displaying only basic functional skills at best, and they're often seen as having insufficient or absent pretend and imaginative play. This widespread concept has led to the so-called developmental deficit of play being added to the diagnostic criteria as a defining feature of autism. This common misconception entirely misses the possibility that authentic autistic play contains hidden gems and moments of truth, revealing the secret joys of that individual child that we can share and appreciate with them in their own way. Play interventions are not uncommon, as I'm sure you know, in the field of autism, but they often refer to terms such as symptoms, disorders and treatments. And this is despite claiming to be focused on things like the joyful emotional engagement of the child, which is the exact words from one such intervention. And they go as far as saying that autistic children are missing out and not achieving vital milestones. However, these notions are based on typical or non-autistic development, limited by neurotypical expectations rather than being truly accepting of autistic play as it is. For instance, the DIR floor time approach purports to be individualised and relationships-based play, but it does still aim to get children back on track on a developmental pathway and fails to recognise that autistic play is not a disordered version of normal. So I want everyone to consider what if. What if autistic play simply does not look the same as neurotypical play? I want you to consider that observations of play look for indicators of fun and enjoyment, but who gets to decide what fun and enjoyable is? Assessments for autism look for indicators of deficits based on neurotypical norms, but don't consider autistic play as its own entity. Interventions look to correct, change and remediate the perceived difficulties without considering the consequences of changing a core feature of that child. Authentic autistic play is valid in its own right. Article 31 of United Nations Conventions of the Right of the Child, or the UNCRC, highlights that children and young people have the right to have fun in the way they want to, whether or not they have a disability. To play is to be human, and presuming that autistic children do not play appropriately is dehumanising. Failing to recognise this in practice is at odds with the UNCRC, which protects children's right to play. Play is a human right. However, even the UNCRC suggests that play ought to be age appropriate, and this isn't always how autistic individuals choose to play. So why might this be problematic? Well, the bottom line is it's ableist. Sadly, ableism like this appears all over various policies and documents, and often the person or the organisation might not even realise because they simply don't understand the autistic experience. An autistic child's play preferences can be superficially altered by the withholding of attention if they don't play with the suggested stimulus within behavioural psychology. An autistic child's play preferences may not match the expected preferences of parents or teachers, and preferences may change over time, unbeknownst to anyone other than the child. And an autistic child's play preferences, if identified accurately and authentically, can have wide-ranging implications and far more positive outcomes. Now, just for a little bit of clarification, these are 3 studies specifically on the play preferences of autistic children. The first one by Leaf et al. It demonstrates that behavioural modification can indeed change the superficial preferences through the adult's planned ignoring and disengaging from the child when they play with the toy that they want to instead of the toy that the adult has given them. This is very typical of behavioural, so-called remedial approaches to autistic play. The second one, by Verschure et al., while still focused on the rehabilitation of autistic children, sought to find out how much parents genuinely knew of their child's preferences compared to the child's actual preferences. There were instances where the parents ranked the child's preferences differently to the child's actual preferences, and therefore the parents' notions of what the child liked were inaccurate. And the third one, by Judy and Mertz, they used various activity stations at a museum to determine some of the play preferences of autistic children versus their neurotypical peers. Much of the language remains deficits-based, but they do indicate that autistic children overwhelmingly preferred to play with the sensory-based exhibits. Now, all 3 of these statements equally claim to be evidence-based, but the narrative leans heavily towards the behavioural psychology conceptions of autism, including applied behavioural analysis. But why should autistic children be made to feel wrong in their approach to play? Why must society be compelled to correct the weird, the atypical, or the unique? After all, according to Claparède, the function of play is to allow the child to express themselves, to display their personality, to pursue momentarily the line of their greatest interest in cases where they cannot do so through serious activities. And that's a quote in Piaget. That's how far back that quote goes. Therefore, should the child's play not be allowed to be authentic, true to their greatest interests and true to themselves? Somehow, the intrinsic value of play has become overshadowed by its instrumental value, and those working with autistic children may have allowed it to become a target and a tool for assessment, intervention and therapy, a mode for rehabilitation, and may no longer be chosen or self-directed by the child. Instead, adults should strive to embrace autistic play, as well as value the joy and pleasure, that is, the intrinsic worth, of innate play in autistic children, and being unapologetic about the child's own autistic play preferences. Rigid programs designed to make use of the child's play to reinforce and manipulate desired behaviours, they fail to be play-based at all, because they don't take account of these kind of things, and they cease to be recognised as play in the true sense. And play is a chance for children to develop themselves in accordance with their own ideals of what they should be. Some alternative ideas of autistic play can be found in history. Very recent history, but history nonetheless. Before these dominant discourses built on behaviourist and deficits viewpoints took hold, there were other views that existed. In post-war France, there existed clusters of anti-establishment schools and compounds for autistic children that aspired to deinstitutionalise their care and education. Fernand Delaney was one such pioneer, and after years of working with these so-called delinquents as a special teacher, he created a setup in the Cevennes, lovely mountains. The interventionist approach had begun to emerge, sought to normalise autistic children, but Delaney rejected this approach. Instead, he emphasised the importance of freedom and exploration to play beyond the confines of typical educational and social practice. At the Cevennes, there had existed a common, areas in which the adults and children inhabited, sometimes together, sometimes separate. And the children would often wander, and it was these wanderings that Delaney became particularly interested in. Their freedom allowed the children to journey wherever they pleased, but there existed some chevêtres, the cross beams, which were a point in space where the adults' journeys and the children's wander lines cross each other, or are entangled, a specific spot where their acts coincide. These points in space may be key for teachers to occupy space with and engage with an autistic child, whilst giving them the freedom to wander during play. Delaney allowed unfettered play without disturbing the children or their expressions. Briggs called this reinventing play for autistic children, but really it seems more akin to reinventing the notions of play that our society has come to accept as the norm. Autistic play doesn't need to be reinvented. It always has and always will be an authentic way to live for autistic individuals. Delaney accepted this, and he allowed them to go about their play content in their own actions. He embraced the just thisness of autistic children's lives. And I think this is a beautiful summation of how he and his colleagues observed the children at play without interference or direction, adapting their own behaviours to allow new forms of social expression and gave them back their humanity. So what can we learn from this? Delaney's philosophical ideas have the potential to radically change how autistic play is viewed. Milton notes that similarities between Delaney's writings and those of autistic authors and posits that this can develop and grow into a sound, relatable foundation for thinking about autism and the activities of the autistic community. Using Delaney's philosophy can help develop a programme for teachers working with autistic pupils to manage realistic expectations and to promote the acceptance of the just thisness of autistic play. So my research aims to explore the value of understanding authentic autistic play for the successful inclusion of autistic pupils through one such professional learning programme. I hope to do this by looking at the preconceived ideas of play held by teachers, actual autistic play preferences, and the critical reflection involved in questioning the norms and values currently held by some teachers in our society about autistic play. Prior to beginning this research, I engaged an autoethnographic stance, and I looked inward to examine my own experiences of play as a child and how this would have appeared to others on the outside and how my play might have been pathologised. So, this autistic child's play preferences. In primary 1, which is similar to reception year in England, every week I chose a toy from the toy library. It was always a handbag with little diamonds all over it. Instead of play acting with the dress up like the other children, I used to collect the little diamonds and hide them in my collection to stare at, and I would imagine that they were real, beautiful jewels. I also used to collect little blind bag toys called Little Babies, and I got such joy from collecting them, smelling them, opening the bag, seeing which baby I got. All I did with them was line them up to look at them. I never played with them. But in my head, I saw all the babies in their own world. They were very real to me. And lastly, in primary 7, shortly before starting high school, I had a friend like me, and we'd play make-believe together when all our classmates were past that. One day we returned to class late to find out that they had all been mocking the imaginary worlds that we acted out in the playground. That's the last time I ever remember playing like that in public. From then on, afterwards, I masked at school and in other places where people were watching. That was the last time I ever felt comfortable playing in that way. These examples are all real-life memories of my own play as an autistic child. From my point of view, it was me expressing myself, displaying my personality, pursuing momentarily my line of greatest interest. From an outsider perspective, though, they might have seen a 5-year-old child picking off diamantes from a toy bag and stashing them, or stuck at the earlier stages of play. They might have seen a young girl lining up toy babies and staring at them without initiating any visible pretend play. or difficulties producing spontaneous pretend play. They might have seen two older girls playing a game that was not age appropriate, ostracising themselves from their peers, or on the periphery of classroom social networks. But from my point of view, all I saw was childhood. It was simply play to me, pure, unadulterated, uninterrupted, unfettered play. These were, sometimes literally, given that I used to stash diamonds, the hidden gems of my childhood. I have lots of fond memories before I learned to mask, that day back in primary 7. I was such a happy child until that point. After that, I was not so happy anymore. No matter how atypical it may seem or sound to other people, it was simply my own autistic play. It did not harm my development in any domain. I have normal autistic challenges, which makes sense given that I have an autistic brain and body trying to navigate a non-autistic world and society. But here I am. That's me. I am literate, I am numerate, I have some friends, my own family, I have a full and rich life. I am an individual, and no two autistic individuals will experience the same things or have the same outcomes, but each way of being is as valid and worthwhile as the others. Autistic play is not an atypical, deficient, undeveloped, or impaired version of normal play. Autistic play is an entity in itself. Any indicators of fun and enjoyment, commonly seen in play on a normative scale, need not apply to autistic play. So here's some suggestions for how we can embrace authentic autistic play. We can do this by acknowledging that visual assessments of play may not capture the full picture. Autistic play may look different, but it is still play. We can allow freedom and agency with access to preferred objects, toys, and schemas, protecting their right to play in their own way. We can understand that rather than the autistic child being the one who has to change, perhaps we, the adults, should change our ideals. And believing that authentic autistic play contains hidden gems and moments of truth when we allow the just thisness to emerge. Genuinely accepting that autistic play is not a disordered version of normal and rejecting this ableist perspective. Being mindful of stages of play and types of play and supporting the development of each, but treating it as fluid, not hierarchical. Setting aside our own preconceived notions of what play is and just wholeheartedly welcoming the child's play as it is. And supporting the child, observing their preferences, providing them with opportunity and challenge, but most importantly, autonomy. Now we're coming back to this definition here. And I think you'll agree that what we've talked about definitely does help us to imagine the value and the beauty of autistic play. That's me finished. I know that we are moving on to a Q&A section soon, but if anyone wants to take a moment to screenshot, I am happy to be contacted. I am working away on this research just now, and I will talk to everyone and anyone about it. So please do feel free to contact me. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I can also be contacted by email. This is a little QR code that will take you straight to my Instagram. Okay. And oh, there's my references if you want to screenshot them as well. Thank you very much.